Hello, welcome to the Your Business Card Guy Practical CorelDraw Tips. Today we're going to talk about setting up a custom PDF preset. Say you've got a design that you're working on for a client. In this case, I have a business card that I'm working up here, and I've got three versions to the front, different faces there, and then I've got the back of the card, a nice little typewriter font, kind of a retro cool look to it. And I want to send this out to a client for them to take a look at it. They can pick which face they like, give me their edits, whatever. Essentially, it's the standard proofing process. If I want to do something like a PNG or a JPEG, I've got to do each page individually. So now I'm exporting this thing 4 times. I'm having to name them all. And then you realize that some of the formats don't display on things like smartphones so well. And so the customer says, oh, I can't see it. I'll have to look at it when I get back to my office. And that can turn into a whole other day before they approve the design. And if you're like me and you like to be done with a project and get moving on to the next project, it's nice to be able to keep everything flowing efficiently. I have a lot of people with the business cards these days proofing things on their phones. They look at it and they say, I like number 3. Can you make this bigger? What about this? Whatever. And it's a lot faster because they have it with them on the go throughout their workday. And not having to wait for them to get back to their laptop speeds the whole process up, and I'm not spending so much of my time waiting for my clients. So the best way to handle that is to use PDF as an export, because PDF by default will select all of the pages. You can obviously select just certain pages. You can pick the first 3, you can pick 1, 3, 5, whatever you want to do. It will let you do that. However, you can just send them all, and that way the client has them all to look at in one file, which is very handy. The thing to remember, though, is that if you just pick the default setting with PDF, your design, that file, could be given to another designer. They could import it into their software, and then they would have access to all of the vector graphics, all of the design that you've done. They'd be able to edit it, move it, print it, and they essentially would steal your design. Now, some people will do the proof layer. Well, they have all over the top of it, and that's fine. You can do that. If you want to set up a layer, you just activate it. But the other thing you can do is you can actually set your PDF so that it is viewable. They can open it, look at it with Acrobat, Reader, Standard, whatever they've got, but it's not editable. And it's not the world's best security, of course, but it keeps the honest people honest, and it keeps them from accidentally stealing. A lot of people will send me PDFs, and they'll tell me that that's something that they've paid for, that they've worked on. How do I know any different? So they may be sending your design off to another designer who doesn't know any different. So he takes it and says, yeah, I'll throw it in here and I can edit it and change this, and customer's happy and away they go. This is a way to stop that from happening too willy-nilly. And so let's take a look at some of those settings. And then we'll also take a look at creating your own custom profile so that you're not having to monkey with the settings every time you export the PDF. If you go to the File menu, down to Publish to PDF here, remember that Corel, like the other export functions, does default to the last location. In this case, I've set it up here into a shared spot. If you're working with other designers, maybe you've got a place that you put everything and everything dumps in there, and then somebody sends it to the customer, or other people review your work, or however you have it set up. But if you're an individual working and you've got a customer folder for every one of your clients, you'll have to make sure you navigate to that client, save it. Otherwise, you're basically saving it into the previous folder and you're never going to find it. Down in the lower right, we have a settings button. Click on that. You can now see all of the different settings and the presets. There's a preset here that offers various compatibilities, that offers various built-in settings. We've got all sorts of them to choose from. There is even a pre-press. There's sort of a web version. There's an editing version. There's lots to choose from. There's also the compatibility. You'll notice down here that we have a variety of Acrobats that can be chosen from. The thing to know here is that if you are trying to do an overlayer that's transparent on the top of a vector graphic, where that intersects will look very poor at the lower levels of Acrobat. You can get in there and play with that. I've noticed that with 6, it's like a logo that's transparent that would say something given to you as a client's PNG file. where it goes over the top of a vector graphic, not just the color background, but like a vector graphic that you've got, say a flower or some kind of a frilly, design underneath it or what have you. The export is going to look very jaggedy. It's going to look extremely pixelated, and that is something that they fixed. So if you go to Acrobat 8, for example, you don't run into that same problem. So that allows you to export it, and obviously these days, they're up to 10, I think. So if you've got folks still on 6, you may have to tell them, look, I can't give you the design unless you upgrade, and it's a free upgrade anyway. There's no real reason why they shouldn't upgrade it to a newer version to allow you to give them all the functionality, and then obviously see your design in its best viewable format. Now, throughout these settings, there are the color settings. You can set it up to be CMYK, RGB, the usual suspects. You can also embed the color profile that you're using. In this case, this is the commercial printer profile. You have the, if you want to put in your document information, you can, the author, that kind of stuff. Objects would be things like the graphics that you have inside the design, and so you can have those compressed if you like. What's nice here is you can set it to a JPEG compression and lower that down so that it isn't 100% quality, so that it's harder for them to take it and steal it. Also on the right, we have the export all text as curves. This is a good setting because then they're not, if they do break the security and get into it, at least the design, all of the letters are separate, and so they can't just edit the text. But remember, if you are trying to share your design and actually give it to someone so they can edit it, you're going to want to make sure you don't select that option, because otherwise they're going to be like, well, these are all curves, I have to retype everything, which, frustrate you. In the pre-press, you can set up the crop marks, which is very nice. That gives you those little lines that show where it's going to be cut off. And that's nice for things like when you're dealing with bleeds and stuff. Customers don't always understand if they're seeing with the bleed. You can show the crop marks, and that way they can understand a little more visually why everything's a little bit bigger than they think it should be. You can say, well, it's going to get cut off here. It's a nice way to educate as well. And then there is the security, but we'll get into that in a second. So with the settings, say I've gone through and I've played with some examples and I've saved a number of files and I found some settings that I like. I've got my objects, I've got my curves, I've got my pre-press with the crop marks, and I say that's perfect, that's exactly what I want. If you were to just export this and then you do the next one, you're starting all the way back over again. And that's kind of a pain in the butt. So what Corel has allowed us to do is we can create our own custom presets. Hit the plus right here, and then we can name this, say, customer proof. And I say OK to that, and there we go. And then let me, I'll just save this here as a little test. Yes, I want to replace it. Thank you. And if I'm working on another design or I make another change, I want to export it again. I hit File, Publish to PDF here. I now have in the presets all of the ones that come from the factory, but I now have this customer proof, which are the settings that I've defined. And so if I click in here, I can take a look. I see that my JPEG compression is still set. Crop marks are still set. My, well, I don't have this filled out. You have everything already done, ready to go, which is very handy. Remember, though, it will default the number of pages. So if you need to change that, you'll have to change that manually. The other thing that you have to change each time is the security. And let's go over that just briefly. Security has two pieces to it. One, it's got the open password. So in other words, they can't even view the PDF without the password. The other is this permissions password. And this is what we want to focus on, because obviously if you're sending a proof, you want your customer to look at it. So we don't need to set a password for that function. They can open it up on their smartphone, on their laptop, whatever. Take a look at it, approve it, ask for edits. That's what we want. That's the point. But we don't want them to steal the design, send it to another designer to have it printed. So that's where the permission password comes in. By selecting this, you now have access to the printing options, which is low and high res or no printing at all, and then the editing options. Now, the password itself doesn't really matter because you're not actually going to ever use it. you're going to start over from your source file. You're not going to give this password to your customer anyway. So I can type anything I want in here as long as it matches. What I typically do is set my printing permissions to low resolution here. I leave this to none because I do not want them to edit it, and I don't want them copying the text out of it. So I can say OK to that, save this again, overwrite, and that's perfect. But let me show you what happens if they try to bring it in. Okay, so let's say a customer, you've sent them this proof and they send it off to their designer, some kid they've got in-house or whatever, and they just want to essentially steal your design and tell you, I'm not really going to move forward right now with this project. So if they take your PDF and bring it in this case, into Corel, it immediately says, you need a password if you're going to want to edit this thing. And that is a quick and handy way to at least keep the honest people honest, if you will, and then make it at least a little bit harder for people that are trying to be dishonest. This is a fairly good way to go. Using the PDF preset allows you to have your settings saved so that you're not having to change them each time. And it's just a really slick way to create proofs, get your work approved in a timely manner, not having to wait for customers to get back to the office, which just speeds up the whole process, gets the designs approved, gets you paid, and away you go. So I appreciate you coming by and checking out the Business Card Guy Practical CorelDraw Tips. Today we talked about custom PDF preset. Please check out our other tutorials and have a great day.